And you dovetailed right into something. So with that kind of background and this kind of focus, when the COVID pandemic then came, did this automatically it, did you automatically see the connections?
Of course, because I was, as I mentioned, a law reform commissioner. I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm mentioning now. Apart from being a legal academic, I served the law reform commission in Western Australia for 5 years and was appointed by the then Attorney General. My interactions with the political elite were not very pleasant. I wouldn't even describe themselves as necessarily being an elite. They behave in an oligarchical fashion. But I could notice the disregard of these people for the ordinary citizen, and the fact that they sometimes discussed the ideas that were counterproductive to the well-being of the community, even discussing things that raised my concern regarding population control, for instance, and even overpopulation, claiming that Australia is overpopulated. These people are completely mad. I mean, Western Australia is scarcely populated, and they come up with these strange ideas. So I have never trusted in government enough to think that they always want the well-being of everyone. So I have, in my opinion, at least that's what I think, being always very healthily suspicious of government intentions, the intentions of government. And I think that is a very healthy approach that prevents us from being inoculated sometimes with things that you do not necessarily have the confidence that they will be working.
You know, the part of what we're going to be focused on is the issue about COVID-19 pandemic, the legal precedents around vaccine mandates, and so on. But this is why I'm building that background to see that you, one, are not afraid to speak about controversial issues.
Mhm.
Let me ask you, you must have noticed that you seem to be a rare voice. Why
Yeah.
is it that more people are not speaking? What is your thought on that?
I think there are two things. One is cowardly behavior. That some of these people know that I am taking an approach that, according to them, is the most desirable, but they do not have the courage to speak out. Sometimes because I understand that they have families to raise, they have a salary to receive, and they don't want to lose these things. So that's one of the reasons. The other is idolatry of government. Some people, I think this is potentially a result of the decline of the Christian faith or faiths in general, of religion in general, that these people have an idolatry of government, and they really believe that the government is going to save them. And whatever the government does, it must be blindly agreed with and even followed. So there is this combination of factors, and I think many people have lost their sense of self-respect and or
Mm.
their sense of self-dignity, and they probably think that it might give too much work to have to use his or her own brain. So it's better to actually rely on what the government says, and then of course blame the government because it's not a decision made by the person, him or herself.
Wow. So now I'm going to pull you back in history because I'm going to take your name, Zimmermann.
Mm.
Zimmermann is a German name. What are your German connections in relation to the history that I think I'm going to refer to?
It's always a bit complicated to be discussing that particular period of time because of my German name. But of course, I must say that my grandfather, speaking a perfect German and coming from Germany, he actually fought against the Nazis in the Second World War, serving the Brazilian army. He was an air pilot. And he always taught in my family us to be free, to fight for freedom and human rights. I must say that I'm so blessed to have come from a family that there is this concern for individual rights and freedoms. So I think another characteristic coming from my family is the fact that we know history. And I have always been taught by my father about the past. And you know that those who do not know history, you'll be condemned to repeat history and perhaps to potentially make this new return of ancient ideas even worse because of the advancement of technology. So I'm really concerned about the repetition of certain elements from the past, including this idea that people should be daubing on others, should be accusing others of not being complacent and compliant enough. And I saw some developments that really disturbed me because it was not just the behavior of the governments, it was the behavior of the population in general. And that's one of the approaches taken by these parasitical ruling classes. What they really want is to make it impossible for neighbors to get together, for friends to join themselves in meetings and having a proper life. I think this COVID madness, this whole 3 years, separated people. And when you separate people, people started to actually get the information from the mainstream media and get also antisocial. And I can see this phenomenon taking place of people who basically now stay at home, even being told by the employers to stay at home because they can even be less financially of a burden to their employers.
That's some very powerful stuff. And I think that I agree with you, Augusto, in that history is very, very important in terms of understanding where we are now. And I think that sometimes people think that the association with the Nazi regime in World War II is going too far, meaning that
Mm.
it's not at all connected, not at all similar. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, you know, the legal profession and the medical profession were very compliant with the Nazi regime, and they would be operating in such a manner as to undermine their own code of ethics. And I saw this taking place over here when judges in Australia and even members of the legal profession didn't have any consideration for the rule of law, for the protection of individual rights and freedoms, because they took an approach that everything must be obeyed and that the government has the final say on these matters. So if the government has the final say on these matters, the government is God and then can actually remove any individual rights and freedom. But that's not part of our legal tradition. So what makes me quite worried about this whole thing is that most of the legal profession now do not know basic principles of the common law. And I think this is the case because they do not teach history, legal history in law schools anymore. And some law schools don't even teach jurisprudence. So these are just the operators of the legal system and do whatever the government tells them to do. That reminds me of the behavior of the German society during that particular period of time that actually idolized the leader. So when you think of now we know Hitler is bad, an evil man, but the German society adored him, and he was more popular than most of these current tyrants. So I mean, to say that Hitler was evil, we now know, and that he had always been evil, but he was adored and loved by the German people to the point, of course, that he didn't have to rig the elections, as some appear to be doing now, to be chosen by the German people. So popularity doesn't mean that the person is necessarily a good person or it's going to be protecting our fundamental rights and freedoms, and quite to the contrary.